This cannot possibly be happening. It's so completely beyond comprehension. God, tears again.
I know.
You know, you knew what happened to me with...
And I could have never imagined this ever in my entire life. Things like this don't just happen. And the fact that I can tell you this, thank you. Just thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's a rough pleasure, but...
I know.
You know, you knew what happened to me with Marvel Comics. That was something. It's really something to see yourself portrayed. You know, I got accused of being a Nazi pretty much when all this happened. It was really something because I had been teaching students what we're talking about today, about these temptations that you faced and how people, as individuals, get sucked into that totalitarian hell. So that was something for that to happen, such a reversal. And then to have that comic book come out, well, it was surreal. It was absolutely surreal to be portrayed, because Nazi wasn't enough, right? We had to go right for the archetype itself. So I think we've raised about $400,000 for charity now on the basis of that. So that was a fun reversal. But it was really shocking when I first saw that. I just couldn't believe it. I was very ill at the time too. I thought, this can't be real. This has to be Photoshopped. This cannot possibly be happening. It's so completely beyond comprehension. And, you know, to come from the pen of one of the foremost black intellectuals. And I use the racial category only because that's the categories that he's using to operate within. This is true, as this whole conversation illustrates.
Are you happy? What's a better question for me to ask Jordan Peterson?
How are you doing?
How are you doing? How are you doing?
Brilliantly and terribly. You know, when you listen to a profound piece of music, you get the beautiful transcendence of the music. And that's meaning, you know, that's awful in the most fundamental sense, but you need an antidote to suffering, and it has to be deep. And you know, deep moves you tectonically, and it's not a trivial thing. But that's better than happiness. And maybe if you're lucky while you're pursuing that and while you're immersed in it, you get to be happy, and you should fall on your knees and be grateful for that when it happens. You know, it's a gift. It really is a gift. And it comes upon you unexpectedly, your happiness, you know. You aim to climb uphill to the highest peak you can possibly envision. And that's better than happiness. Well, for example, now when I go, wherever I go in the world, people come up to me and they're usually, I wouldn't say they're happy to see me. They're often in tears, you know, and they often have a pretty rough story to relate. You know, they were suicidal or nihilistic or homicidal or trapped, desperate, you know, and they tell me that real fast. And then they say, I've overcome that to a large degree, and thank you for that. And you think, well, that's really something to have that happen over and over. In some ways, you might think, well, how could anything better possibly happen to you than to have people come up to you all over the world, strangers, and open themselves up like that, like they're old friends so quickly. But at the same time, it's an awful thing, because you see, even in the revelation of their triumph, the initial depth of their despair. So I wouldn't change that. But it's not nothing. And it's certainly not just happiness. It's better than happiness, but it's almost unbearable. God, tears again.
Why do you do what you do?
To see what will happen. Some programs you cannot predict, right? You cannot predict how they're going to end. You have to run them. Well, you know, I believe that truth will save the world. I believe that. So you speak truthfully and you watch what happens and you take your consequences, you know, and maybe you hope and have some faith that in the final analysis, things will work out in your favor. But perhaps they will and perhaps they won't. But that's faith, eh? That's faith. Faith isn't believing in things you regard as ridiculous, sacrificing your intellect. It's a decision. No. Will truth, beauty, and love save the world? Well, you can find out.
Well, I'm really attracted to my wife. Well, and we've been, isolated from each other for a long time because we were both so sick. It's been 2 years, really. And the physical intimacy element of our marriage is extremely important. We're very careful about that and value it extremely highly and pay a tremendous amount of attention. It's really important that the sexual element, the romantic element, those two things, when they're properly handled, they're indistinguishable. And if you think that sex is okay without romance, you don't know anything about romance, because sex is so much better with romance that it's not even the same thing. So that's all important. But as you get older, what's important is that, well, you have a family, you have your children, you have your grandchildren, you have a continuity of narrative, you have a long-term relationship that you've built. That's what's important. And when you're doing things impulsively when you're young, you're not paying attention to the old you. You have to have the old you in mind. You're going to be old, and you have to be building towards that, or you're going to be old and things are going to be a catastrophe. This idea that you said, well, I can be just like those men. It's like, well, that isn't even the men you want. Why would you imitate the men that you don't want?
So here's a story. I love this story, man. It just killed me. I was in LA at the Orpheum. And it's rough downtown in LA in places, around the Orpheum too. And Tammy and I, my wife, because she's traveling with me and is a big help, by the way, we were wandering around downtown LA the morning after the talk. And we're walking down the street, and we were on streets we probably shouldn't have been on. But in any case, because what the hell do we know, being stupid Canadians? And so we were walking down the street, and this car pulled up beside us, and this kid hopped out. And he's a good-looking Latino kid, 20, 21, something like that. He jumped over, and he said, he's all excited. He said, "Are you Dr. Peterson?" I said, yeah. And he said, "I'm really, really happy to meet you. I've been watching your lectures for like a year and a half, and I've been trying to put my life together, and it's really working. I'm really doing way better. I really wanted to thank you." And so it's lovely, when you're walking down a kind of rough area and somebody pulls up beside you and they jump out of the car to tell you how much better their life is. That's a pretty good morning. And so, but then that isn't all that happened. He ran back to his car. He said, wait a minute. He went back to his car and he got out his dad, and they came over together, and his dad was just smiling away, like a real smile, And so was the kid, and they had their arms around each other, and they said, "Look, like we've really been working on our relationship for the last year and a half, and it's going just great. We want to thank you." And the father said something like, "I'm really happy that you got my son back to me." It's like, yes, that's what this bloody tour has been like. It's great. And everybody that's coming to these talks, that's what they're trying to do. I got 3,000 people in each audience, and what they're trying to do is figure out, how can I take maximal responsibility for my own life? How can I imbue it with the meaning that helps me withstand tragedy and suffering? How can I be a better person? And wouldn't it be great if that was of optimal benefit to my family and the community?
You're getting very emotional about this.
Well, it's something, Joe. Jesus, I've seen like 150,000 people in the last 2 months. And this is what it's, well, you'll have a chance to talk to Ruben about this too. This is what it's been like. It's so positive. I can't believe it. And it's just one person after another saying, like, look, I was having a rough time. I'm really happy that I've been encountering what you've been talking about. I've really been trying to put things together, and it's really helping. And I think, and I'm hoping that if enough people in the West, and then in the rest of the world for that matter, but we're very polarized in the West right now, if enough people take responsibility for getting their individual lives together, then we'll get wise enough so we won't let this process of political polarization put us back to the same places that we went so many times in the 20th century. I don't see another antidote for it. It's not political. It's ethical. And if you haven't yet done so, and you feel like doing it, hit the subscribe button.